In 1985, he adopted 3 black daughters. See how they are now, 40 years later. It was the summer of 1985 when Richard Collins, a 42-year-old widower and small-town carpenter in Ohio, walked into a children's home simply because he couldn't stand another quiet night in his empty house. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier, and though his heart was still healing, he felt a tug, a pull toward giving his love where it was needed most. What he never expected that day was to walk out as the father of not 1, but 3 little girls. The social worker had warned him, they're sisters. Black girls. Ages 4, 6, and 8. Nobody wants to separate them, but no family is willing to take them all. Richard remembered the way the girls huddled together, their big brown eyes filled with fear and suspicion. They had been passed around from one foster home to another, never staying long enough to unpack their bags. Something inside him ached. He didn't care that he was white, middle-aged, or that people would whisper about the strange family. He just knew one thing, he could not walk away from those 3 daughters who clung to each other as if the world was against them. The first months were hard. He didn't know how to braid hair, what products to buy, or how to answer the stares from neighbors when he walked into church with 3 black girls calling him daddy. The eldest, Denise, refused to speak for weeks. The middle child, Angela, tested every boundary, sure he'd send them away like the others. And the youngest, little Mariah, cried herself to sleep every night, whispering to her sisters that she wanted their real mama. But Richard never gave up. He spent nights at the library reading books about black culture, hair care, and parenting traumatized children. He asked questions, made mistakes, apologized, and tried again. Slowly, the walls began to fall. Denise opened up the day Richard showed up at her school talent show, holding a handmade sign that said, "That's my girl." Angela started to trust when he let her help build furniture in his workshop, teaching her how to hold a hammer with pride. And Mariah? She fell asleep in his arms one night after a thunderstorm, finally believing that this new daddy wasn't going anywhere. The years rolled by with their share of struggles. Richard faced judgment from both sides, people in town who muttered about race, and even family members who thought he'd ruined his life. Money was always tight, and raising 3 daughters as a single dad wasn't easy. Yet he kept going, fueled by the sound of laughter in his house, the smell of Sunday dinners shared, and the sight of 3 little girls blossoming into young women. Denise grew up with a quiet determination, becoming the first in the family to attend college. Angela discovered her gift for teaching and spent her early years tutoring neighborhood kids who couldn't afford lessons. And Mariah, the baby, found her voice in music, singing in the church choir until people in town came just to hear her. By the time the 2000s arrived, Richard was no longer just that carpenter who adopted black kids. He was Dad, the man who showed up at every graduation, every heartbreak, and every milestone with open arms and steady love. And then, 40 years later, in 2025, something remarkable happened. On a crisp autumn evening, hundreds of people filled a community center in Cleveland. At the front of the stage stood Richard, now 82 years old, his hair white and his back slightly bent but his spirit unbroken. He had no idea what was about to unfold. The event was organized by his daughters. Denise, now a respected judge, took the microphone first. She told the crowd about the man who taught her that being seen and heard mattered, no matter the color of her skin. Angela, now a school principal, shared how her father's patience had inspired her to dedicate her life to lifting up children who felt invisible. And Mariah, now a Grammy-nominated gospel singer, walked out with tears streaming down her cheeks and sang a song she had written just for him, "The Man Who Stayed." When she finished, the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. But the biggest surprise came next. Together, the sisters announced that they had established the Richard Collins Foundation, dedicated to supporting foster children and ensuring siblings would never be separated in the system. Richard sat there, his hands trembling, overwhelmed by the legacy his simple act of kindness had created. He had adopted 3 frightened little girls in 1985, never knowing if he was strong enough for the journey. Yet here they were, 40 years later, powerful women standing before the world as living proof of love's resilience. Through tears, he whispered, "I thought I was saving you, but it was you three who saved me." The room grew quiet, and then Mariah leaned down, kissed his forehead, and said, "No, Daddy. You taught us that family isn't about blood, it's about choosing love, and sticking with it, no matter what." That night, everyone in that hall carried home a piece of that truth. And long after the applause faded, Richard's story lived on, reminding the world that sometimes the smallest decision, to open your heart, to refuse to walk away, can ripple forward for generations. Because in 1985, one man said yes to 3 little girls no one wanted. And 40 years later, that yes had changed the world.